And you know what that really sparked in me was remembering, one of the many things that I've been known for is neighbour disputes in social housing. And I remember that when I first started doing this work, some sort of 30 years ago, the the kinds of conflicts we were called to mediate were noise, rubbish, parking, children, um, all the sorts of normal tensions of putting people onto housing estates, and making them live close together that you would expect. Okay, that's pretty standard stuff. But I noticed that as time has gone on, the problems are much more complex. Much more complex. You're talking about real deprivation. You're talking about, mental health issues. You're talking about things that used to have containers. There used to be places for people with mental health issues. There used to be reliable places. I mean, there are still places, but resources are too stretched. There used to be resourced places for addictions and the kinds of problems that people had. And now those resources are far too stretched, and people are having to sort of roll about and manage this stuff. And that comes out in violence and criminality. And not that I like the word criminality, but, violence, abuse, um, dealing in stolen goods, joining gangs, moving weapons around, and these kinds of deep, dark issues that you cannot boil down to a neighbour dispute. And so I'd be interested in your opinion on that.
Well, I think the neighbour disputes continue,
Yes.
and I don't think they'll ever go away. But I think things have become significantly harder in communities to navigate. We talk about care in the community, and what I think is that, as you rightly point out, a lot of services that might still exist in some shape or another simply don't have the same resources that they did. There once were many more police on the streets, or you'd see them more often, or at least that's the impression we have. Mental health services, if you're a young person lucky enough to have a diagnosis, the chances of getting access to CAMS services are really slim. And if you don't know how to navigate the system, if English isn't your first language, that's going to be tougher still. Plus, you put into the system the fact that the system can be discriminatory, and that we often have sort of Eurocentric biases to the way that services are delivered, and that can often exclude others. And in the context of how we then create resilient communities who are able to withstand these growing pressures, it's really important that we understand what kind of tools are at our disposal to ensure that we really do justice to this question of equity, to lifting up those people who have the least, who have, the very slimmest access to pulling any levers that might influence their services that affect their lives. And we talk about restorative justice and reconciliation and social justice, and sometimes these things actually come into conflict with each other, because you can bring two parties together around the table to try and negotiate a settlement and some peaceful solutions. But the truth is that you're often talking about a very big discrepancy in the power dynamic that exists around between those two parties or three parties. So we're really laying on the community a big responsibility to soak up the challenges that the post-war consensus, which once sort of we bought into, which meant that we paid our taxes and services would be delivered and we'd go about contributing to the local economy. That trust in that consensus has broken down, and for many people it feels as though they're not getting anything in response. They're shouting into a void.